Dead silence reigned in the courtroom at the judge's pronouncement. Connor was stunned. He'd won. He rose and found his 3 brothers, Aiden, Brian, and Devin, jostling to their feet behind him, smiling from ear to ear. Aiden reached out first to hug him across the courtroom rail. Connor held on, afraid that if he let go, the tears that were threatening would fall. His chin began to quiver, and he gritted his teeth to still it. He felt Brian slap him on the back and saw Devin's reassuring thumbs up through eyes blurred with tears of joy. One escaped, and he let go of Aiden to roughly brush it away. He turned to shake hands with his father, who put a comforting hand on his shoulder as he shot a nasty look in the direction of King Grayhawk, who was sitting directly behind Molly's parents.
100 to 1 that son of a bitch had something to do with the Robertsons trying to steal my grandkids away,
Angus said. Connor wasn't so sure, especially since it was Eve Grayhawk's testimony about Molly's wishes that seemed to swing the judge in his favor. Surely King's daughter wouldn't have defied her father's wishes when he was sitting right there in the courtroom. Then he remembered what Eve had told him last night, how she and her sisters had been given 1 year to find somewhere else to live, how she would soon have no land on which she could graze the wild mustangs she'd saved from slaughter. Most likely, he had King Grayhawk's bad behavior to thank for Eve being so determined to testify on his behalf. Connor couldn't believe he'd kissed her, or how much he'd enjoyed it. He'd wanted to hold her in his arms and keep on kissing her, but he'd been stabbed with thorns of guilt. He'd loved his wife, but he'd been attracted to Eve Grayhawk ever since he'd seen her standing by her locker, which happened to be directly across from his locker, the year she started high school. Connor had been stunned by the change in Eve's appearance over the summer. The gangly girl was gone. In her place was a voluptuous siren. His body had reacted so quickly and strongly to the sight of her gamine smile, sparkling blue eyes, and spectacular curves that he'd been late for his first class while he waited for his arousal to subside. It had taken a while for his heart to catch up to his little head, but before long he'd been besotted. After all the things she and her sisters had done to him and his brothers, however justified, it would have been blasphemy to admit that he liked her. But he shot longing looks at her whenever he was sure nobody was looking. That whole Eve business had started when his younger brother Devin had caught him watching her, and he'd needed to come up with something to deflect attention from the fact that he was ogling one of King's brats. His eyes had locked with hers once as they passed each other on the way to class, with the result that his heart had pounded and his palms had been sweaty and his throat had been dry for 5 minutes after she turned away. A couple of times he thought she was going to cross the hall to speak to him, but she never did. Instead, Molly Robertson, whose locker was right next to Eve's, had come running up to him to tell him how glad she was that he'd agreed to go to the Sadie Hawkins dance with her. He'd lifted his gaze and seen the guilty look on Eve's face as she stood by her locker. He'd put a sneer on his face that only she could see, then turned his most winsome smile on the petite, pretty girl standing in front of him. "I'm looking forward to it," he told her. His chest ached for an hour afterward. The date with